Eleanor Parker woke at 5:47 in the morning, not because she was an early riser, not because the December sun had crept through her curtains. She woke because grief kept its own schedule, and after 62 years of living in silence, she had learned to listen to what her body was telling her. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of the room that had once belonged to her son and daughter-in-law. Now it was hers. Everything in this house felt borrowed, rearranged, still echoing with the footsteps of a woman who would never walk these halls again. Sarah. Beautiful, warm, laughing Sarah. Gone 2 years now, taken by an elevator that dropped 3 floors without warning. Eleanor rose slowly, her joints protesting the cold. At 62, her body had begun its quiet rebellion against movement, against time, against the endless cycle of waking up to face another day of watching her family grieve. She moved through the darkened hallway, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The photos on the wall told a story she knew by heart. Her wedding to Harold in 1985, both of them young and deaf and impossibly hopeful. Nathan's first steps, captured in a blur of motion. Nathan and Sarah's wedding day, her son's face bright with a joy Eleanor hadn't seen since. And then the photos stopped. 2 years of life, unrecorded, as if time itself had paused, waiting for permission to continue. She paused at Nathan's workshop door, slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see her son hunched over his drafting table, his shoulders shaking in the dim light. No sound, no sobs, just the silent heaving of a man who had learned to cry without making noise, so his daughters wouldn't hear. He thought she didn't know about these 3 a.m. grief sessions. He thought the closed door was enough to hide them. But you cannot hide pain from a mother, especially one who has spent 62 years reading the world through eyes instead of ears. Eleanor watched for a long moment, her heart breaking in the familiar way it had broken every day since Sarah died. She wanted to go to him, wanted to wrap her arms around her grown son and tell him it would be okay. But some grief needed to be witnessed, not fixed. She continued to the kitchen, started the coffee, and made a decision she didn't fully understand yet. Her son had spent 2 years drowning. It was time someone threw him a rope. She just didn't know the rope would arrive in the form of a crying stranger. Across town, in a small apartment decorated for a holiday she wasn't sure she believed in anymore, Emma Collins stood in front of her mirror and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. The burgundy dress was new. She'd bought it specifically for tonight, telling herself it was practical, that she needed something nice for the holidays anyway. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She wanted to feel beautiful again. She wanted to remember what it felt like to hope. 3 years since David's heart had simply stopped. 3 years since she'd found herself suddenly, impossibly alone. 3 years of teaching other people's children while dreaming of the ones she would never have with the man she'd planned to marry. Her sister Rachel appeared in the doorway, her hands moving in sign language with the slight hesitation of someone who had learned it as an adult. "You look beautiful," Rachel signed. "I look desperate. You look like someone who's finally ready to live again." Rachel stepped closer, adjusting the collar of Emma's dress with the fussy attention of an older sister who had never quite stopped mothering. "David would want this for you." Emma flinched at the name. She always did. "What if it's like the others?" she asked, her hands moving quickly, nervously. "What if he sees me as a project, something to fix, something to tolerate until he gets tired of the effort?" Rachel's expression softened. "Then he doesn't deserve you. But Emma, you have to stop assuming the worst. Not everyone is going to reject you." Emma wanted to believe her. God, how she wanted to believe her. But experience had taught her otherwise. The dates that ended the moment she explained her deafness. The men who asked if she could just read lips so they wouldn't have to learn signs. The matches who unmatched. The conversations that faded. The slow dawning realization in people's eyes that loving her would require more effort than they were willing to give. She didn't know that in 3 hours she would meet a family who thought she was exactly enough. The Harrington Bistro hummed with holiday warmth. Families gathered around tables laden with early Christmas dinners. Couples shared desserts and secrets. Children pressed their faces to the frost-covered windows, watching for snow that hadn't yet begun to fall. At a corner table by the window, Emma Collins sat alone and watched the minutes tick past. 6:15. She adjusted her napkin. 6:30. She checked her phone. No messages. 6:45. The waitress refilled her water glass for the fourth time, her eyes sliding from understanding to something that looked dangerously like pity. 6:47. Her phone buzzed. Emma's heart leaped, then crashed. "Hey, can't make it tonight. Just realized this probably won't work out anyway. The deaf thing is more than I'm looking for right now. Take care." She read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less cruel. The deaf thing. Not her teaching career. Not her sense of humor. Not her love of old movies or her inability to cook pasta without burning it or her habit of talking to her plants. Just the deaf thing. As if 28 years of learning to navigate a hearing world, of earning her master's degree, of teaching children to believe in themselves, could be reduced to an inconvenience. Emma signaled for the check, fighting to keep her composure. She would not cry here. She would not give this restaurant full of happy couples the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. She didn't notice the silver-haired woman watching her from across the restaurant. Eleanor had noticed the young woman the moment she walked in. There was something in her posture, the careful way she moved through the room, her eyes scanning constantly, reading lips, reading expressions, reading the hundred silent cues that hearing people never had to notice. Eleanor recognized it because she moved the same way, had moved that way for 62 years. She watched the young woman check her phone, watched hope drain from her face like water from a broken glass. And suddenly, Eleanor was 22 years old again, sitting in a diner in Philadelphia, staring at a note that said, "I'm sorry, I just can't see a future with someone who can't hear." Thomas. She hadn't thought of him in years. But watching this young woman crumble, Eleanor remembered every detail. The checkered tablecloth, the cold coffee, the way her hands had shaken so badly she could barely read his handwriting. She had cried for 3 hours that night. She had sworn off love entirely. And then, 6 months later, Harold Parker had walked into her life and changed everything. But this young woman didn't know that part of the story yet. All she knew was the pain. Eleanor watched her granddaughters, Sophie and Lily, 5 years old and observant in the way children of deaf grandmothers learn to be, notice the crying stranger. "Grandma," Sophie signed, her small hands moving with perfect clarity, "that lady is really sad." "Can we help her?" Lily added. "It's almost Christmas. Nobody should be sad at Christmas." Eleanor looked at her granddaughters, then at the crying woman, then at her son Nathan, who was studying the menu with the fixed concentration of a man trying very hard not to feel anything. She made a decision. "Go," she signed to the girls, "but be gentle." Emma felt a gentle tug on her dress. She looked down to find two identical little girls staring up at her, their curly brown hair catching the warm restaurant lighting. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with serious eyes and matching green dresses. Then the one on the left raised her small hands and signed with perfect, startling clarity. "Can we join you? You look sad." Emma stared. She blinked, certain she had misread. But the little girl was still there, waiting patiently for an answer, her hands poised to receive a response. "You know sign language?" Emma signed back, kneeling to their level. "Our grandma is deaf. She teaches us." The girl pointed across the restaurant to an elegant, silver-haired woman who was watching them with knowing eyes. "I'm Sophie. This is Lily." "You're really pretty," Lily added matter-of-factly. "Why are you crying?" Something broke open in Emma's chest, something she had kept locked tight since reading that message. She laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even herself. "Someone was supposed to meet me for dinner," she said, her hands moving slowly so the girls could follow. "But they decided not to come." "That's mean," Sophie signed emphatically, her small face scrunching with indignation. "Especially before Christmas. Christmas is for being together." "Very mean," Lily agreed, crossing her arms. A man appeared behind them, slightly out of breath, his face flushed with embarrassment. He was tall, with kind eyes that matched his daughter's, and when he spoke, his hands moved simultaneously in sign language, a habit so natural it was clearly part of who he was. "I'm so sorry," he said, signing. "They just took off before I could stop them." "It's okay." Emma stood, wiping quickly at her eyes. "They were keeping me company." "Daddy, she got stood up," Sophie announced loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "That means someone was supposed to come, but didn't come." The man, Nathan, Emma would learn, looked at his daughter with the expression of a parent who had long ago accepted that his children had no concept of volume control. And then Eleanor Parker arrived at the table. She moved slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. And when she stopped in front of the young woman, she didn't offer sympathy or platitudes. She simply signed, "You'll join us. The girls have already decided, and I've learned not to argue with them." It wasn't a question. Emma looked at this silver-haired stranger, at the two little girls beaming up at her, at the bewildered man who seemed to have lost control of his entire family. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she said yes. The booth was too small for 5 people, but nobody seemed to mind. Sophie had claimed the spot next to Emma immediately, pressing against her side with the casual intimacy of a child who had never learned to fear strangers. Lily sat across from them, next to her father, but kept leaning across the table to show Emma her drawings on the paper placemat. Nathan Parker watched this scene unfold with an expression caught somewhere between confusion and wonder. But it was Eleanor who commanded the conversation. She had positioned herself next to Emma deliberately, creating a configuration that felt oddly like family, and she didn't waste time on small talk. "Tell me about yourself," she signed to Emma, ignoring the holiday chaos around them. "Not the polite version, the real one." Emma hesitated. She had grown accustomed to the polite version, the version that made hearing people comfortable, the version that glossed over the loneliness, the rejection, the endless exhaustion of navigating a world that wasn't designed for her. But something about Eleanor's steady gaze, the gaze of someone who had seen everything and judged nothing, made her honest. "I'm a teacher," Emma signed. "3rd grade at Mayfield School for the Deaf. I've been there 3 years, ever since my fiancé died." She paused, surprised at herself for offering that information so easily. "Tonight was supposed to be my first date since then. My sister convinced me to try." "And instead, you got a message about the deaf thing." Emma stared. "How did you know?" Eleanor's expression softened, and for a moment she looked very far away. "Because I got the same message," she signed slowly. 1984. A diner in Philadelphia. His name was Thomas. Her hands paused, then continued. "I thought my life was over that night. I was wrong." Over the next hour, while Nathan helped the girls negotiate with their vegetables and the restaurant buzzed with holiday cheer, Eleanor shared a story she rarely told. "I was 22, she signed. "Thomas was hearing, handsome, patient. He said he was learning sign language for me. He said he didn't care that I was deaf, that he loved me for who I was. What happened? He left me sitting in that diner with a note I can still recite word for word." Eleanor's eyes were bright but dry. "He couldn't see a future with someone who couldn't hear." Those were his exact words. Emma felt tears threatening again. "How did you survive it?" "I cried. I swore off love. I buried myself in work." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Sound familiar?" Too familiar. 6 months later, I met Harold. The older woman's face transformed at her late husband's name, softened, warmed, glowed with a love that death hadn't diminished. He was deaf too, stubborn, opinionated, terrible at dancing but convinced he was Fred Astaire. Emma laughed despite herself. He proposed after 6 months, Eleanor continued, and I said no. You said no. I was terrified. I had convinced myself that I was too much trouble, too complicated, too deaf for anyone to really love. Thomas had confirmed every fear I'd ever had about myself. Eleanor reached across the table and took Emma's hand, getting butter from the bread basket on both of them. It took me 3 more months to understand that Harold wasn't asking me despite my deafness. He was asking me because of who I was, all of who I was. Nathan me, who had been pretending not to listen while wiping sauce from Lily's chin, looked up. You never told me that part, Mom, about saying no the first time. Some stories take time to be ready for telling. Eleanor squeezed Emma's hand. Fear is a terrible way to live. Take it from someone who wasted 3 months on it. Christmas morning arrived with the chaos that only young children can create. Emma had been invited, or rather, informed by Sophie and Lily that her attendance was mandatory, and she arrived at the Parker house at exactly 9:07 a.m. The girls had been very specific about the timing. The house exploded around her in a symphony of wrapping paper and cinnamon rolls and excited shrieks. The twins had clearly been awake since dawn, vibrating with the particular energy of children who believe in magic. But it was Eleanor's gift that stopped Emma's heart. In a quiet moment between present opening rounds, the older woman pressed a small velvet box into Emma's hands. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 3 charms, a hand signing the letter E, a snowflake, and a tiny book. I had this made, Eleanor signed. The E is for you and for me, our shared letter. The snowflake is for tonight, for this beginning. The book is for all the stories we haven't written yet. I can't accept this, Emma protested. We just met. This is too much. You already have accepted it. Eleanor's eyes were fierce, determined. You're part of this family now, Emma, whether you're ready to admit it or not. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Emma had experienced since David's death. She fell into a rhythm with the Parker family. Dinners twice a week, homework help, sign language lessons with the girls that somehow always devolved into giggling chaos. She and Eleanor bonded over their shared experiences, their shared language, their shared understanding of what it meant to navigate a hearing world. When I was young, Eleanor signed one evening as they prepared dinner together. My parents didn't learn sign language. They thought I should read lips, learn to speak, try to be as hearing as possible. That must have been isolating. It was. It wasn't until I went to a deaf school that I finally felt like I could breathe. Eleanor paused, her hands still. And then I met Harold and I realized breathing wasn't enough. I wanted to sing. Emma understood exactly what she meant. But not everyone saw this new rhythm as something to celebrate. In late January, Emma's sister Rachel drove up unannounced. She found Emma in Eleanor's kitchen, flower in her hair, laughing at something Lily had signed. Can we talk? Rachel asked when Emma noticed her. Privately? Outside in the cold January air, Rachel's hands moved with sharp, agitated gestures that Emma recognized as fear dressed up as anger. What are you doing, Emma? What do you mean? I mean spending every day with this family, missing Sunday dinners with us, getting so attached to another woman's children that they call you auntie. The word hit like a slap. Another woman's children. That's not what's happening, Emma signed. Isn't it? Rachel's face was pained. I'm the one who convinced you to try dating again. I wanted you to move on. Yes, but this isn't moving on. This is inserting yourself into someone else's life. This is trying to fill a hole that David's death created with a ready-made family. They need me, and You need to be needed. I know. Rachel softened slightly. But Emma, what happens when Nathan meets someone? When he doesn't need the free babysitter anymore? You'll have lost everything all over again. Emma felt the words carve into her, finding every insecurity she had tried to bury. I love them, she signed, her hands trembling. I know you do. That's what scares me. 3 days after Rachel's visit, Emma arrived at the Parker house to find an ambulance in the driveway. The world stopped. She ran. Inside, Nathan was white-faced, the girls crying, paramedics loading Eleanor onto a stretcher. The older woman's face was ashen, one side drooping slightly. Stroke, Nathan managed. They think it's small, but Emma's training kicked in. She knelt beside the stretcher, signing slowly so Eleanor could understand. I'm here. The girls are safe. Nathan is with you. You're going to be okay. Eleanor's working hand caught Emma's wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes, still sharp, still fierce, locked onto Emma's face. Tell him, she signed with difficulty. Tell Nathan, don't waste time on fear. Eleanor, promise me? I promise. The doctors called it a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, a warning shot. Eleanor would recover, but she needed to slow down, reduce stress, accept that her body had limits she had spent 62 years ignoring. In the hospital waiting room, Nathan sat with his head in his hands. The girls had fallen asleep against Emma, their small bodies warm and trusting. I could have lost her, Nathan said quietly, not signing, just speaking, as if the words were too heavy for his hands. After Sarah, I can't lose anyone else. Emma reached over and took his hand. No words, no signs, just presence. A week later, her sister Rachel called with news. The Northeastern Academy in Boston wants to interview you. Rachel signed excitedly. Lead curriculum developer. Emma, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Emma stared at the email Rachel had forwarded. The salary, the prestige, the chance to shape deaf education at the highest level. You should at least consider it, Rachel urged. Don't throw away your future for a family that isn't yours. But lying awake that night, Emma didn't think about prestige or salary. She thought about Sophie's hand slipping into hers, about Lily's drawings, carefully labeled, to Auntie Emma, about Eleanor's silver bracelet on her wrist, 3 charms catching the moonlight, about Nathan's hand in hers in that hospital waiting room, about a choice that was becoming clearer with every passing day. 3 weeks after her stroke, Eleanor had recovered enough to be stubborn again. She was slower now, a slight tremor in her left hand that hadn't been there before. Occasional moments where words, signed or imagined, slipped away from her, but her eyes were still sharp, and her patience for nonsense had evaporated entirely. She cornered Nathan in his workshop one evening, lowering herself onto his work stool with careful determination. You're in love with her, she signed flatly. Don't bother denying it. I had a stroke. I'm not interested in polite lies anymore. Nathan opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. His mother had always been able to see through him. It's complicated, he finally managed. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. Eleanor's hands moved with fierce precision. You love Emma. The girls love Emma. And unless I've completely lost my ability to read people, Emma loves all of you. It's too fast. It's been less than 2 months. Your father proposed to me after 6 months. I said no the first time because I was afraid. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond, worn smooth by decades of wear. This was my engagement ring. Harold gave it to me in 1985, after I finally found the courage to say yes. Nathan stared at the ring. His mother had worn it every day of his childhood, every day of his father's illness, every day since Harold's death 20 years ago. Mom, I can't take this. You can, and you will. She pressed it into his palm, closing his fingers around it. 40 years I wore this ring. 40 years of marriage to a man who never once made me feel like a burden. Don't waste time on fear, Nathan. I almost died 3 weeks ago. If that taught me anything, it's that life is too short to spend it being afraid of love. The Boston email sat in Emma's inbox like a judgment. She had visited. The school was incredible. Cutting-edge facilities, innovative curriculum, a deaf principal who had welcomed her like family. The salary would nearly double what she made at Mayfield. It was, objectively, everything she had worked toward for the past decade. But every time she imagined accepting, she saw Sophie and Lily's faces. She felt Eleanor's bracelet on her wrist. She remembered Nathan's hand reaching for hers in the dark of that waiting room. Rachel called every day, pushing, encouraging, insisting. "This is about them, isn't it?" Rachel signed during a video call. "You're turning down your dream for a man you've known 2 months. It's not about Nathan. It's about all of them. It's about belonging somewhere. You belong with your family, with me." Emma felt the old familiar pull, the obligation, the guilt, the sense that Rachel's way was the right way because Rachel had always been the successful one, the hearing one, the one who moved through the world without barriers. But then she remembered Eleanor's words, spoken in a hospital bed with half her face still frozen. "Don't waste time on fear." "I love you, Rachel," Emma signed slowly, "but I'm tired of living my life based on what might go wrong. I'm tired of assuming I'm too much for people. For once, I want to believe I'm exactly enough." Nathan asked Emma to come to his workshop on a cold February evening. The bridge model sat completed on his workbench, an elegant pedestrian crossing designed to connect two sides of a park that had been separated by a ravine. "I started this after Sarah died," Nathan said, signing as he spoke. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "I needed to create something about connection, about bridging gaps." "It's beautiful," Emma said. "I couldn't finish it. For 2 years I kept working on it, but there was always something missing. Some piece I couldn't identify." He paused. "And then you walked into that restaurant, crying, and my daughters decided you were worth knowing. And slowly everything fell into place." "Nathan, wait, let me finish." He took a breath and Emma saw him gather courage like armor. "My mother almost died, and in that waiting room, watching you hold my daughters while they slept, I realized I've spent 2 years standing on one side of a ravine, too afraid to cross." He reached into his pocket and pulled out Eleanor's ring. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me and told me not to waste time on fear." His eyes met Emma's. "I'm in love with you, Emma Collins. I know it's fast. I know it seems impossible. I know your sister thinks I'm just trying to fill the hole Sarah left. But that's not what this is." "What is it, then?" "It's the rest of my life." His voice broke slightly. "And I'm hoping you'll share it with me." Emma looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the completed bridge behind him. Two sides finally connected. David's face flickered through her memory, not with pain anymore, but with gratitude. He had taught her what love could be, and because of that foundation, she had recognized it when it appeared again. "Yeah," she said. "Yes." They married on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that first night at the Harrington Bistro. The months between Nathan's proposal and their wedding day passed in a blur of planning and joy. Rachel finally won over by watching her sister transform from a woman who had given up on happiness to one who glowed with it, threw herself into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of someone making amends. "I was wrong about them," Rachel admitted to Emma one afternoon as they sorted through invitation samples. "I thought you were running away from grief, but you were running towards something. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Emma hugged her sister tightly. "You were trying to protect me. That's what big sisters do." The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, gathered in the Parkers' snow-covered backyard. White lights twinkled in the bare trees. A string quartet played Silent Night as Eleanor walked Emma down the aisle. Both of them crying, both of them signing "I love you" with trembling hands. The vows were spoken in two languages. Nathan's voice broke when he promised to choose her every day. Emma's hands shook when she promised to be brave. Rachel sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. And when Emma caught her eye during the ceremony, Rachel signed three words. "I was wrong." Sarah's photo held a place of honor on the gift table. Eleanor had insisted. "She would have loved you." Eleanor signed to Emma during their first dance. "She would have been so happy Nathan found you." "I hope so. I know so." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "You're not a replacement, Emma. You're a continuation. That's what love does. It doesn't diminish. It grows." The years that followed were everything Emma had stopped believing was possible. The first year brought the adjustment of becoming a stepmother, learning Sophie and Lily's routines, navigating the delicate balance of honoring Sarah's memory while building something new. Eleanor guided her through it with the patience of a woman who understood that families weren't built in a day. The third year brought Ethan, a surprise pregnancy that terrified Emma and delighted everyone else. "Another grandchild," Eleanor signed when they told her, tears streaming down her face. "Another miracle." He was born on a snowy January morning, hearing like his father, but his first word was signed, "Mama." The seventh year brought Grace, their daughter deaf like Emma, perfect in every way. The girls, now 12, fought over who got to teach her signs first. "She's going to be trilingual," Nathan joked. "English, ASL, and whatever secret twin language Sophie and Lily invented." And now, 11 years after that first Christmas, the family photo wall had expanded beyond what Emma could have imagined. Sarah still smiled from her place of honor, surrounded by new memories. Emma and Nathan's wedding, family vacations to the beach, to the mountains, to a cabin in Vermont where the girls learned to ski. Sophie and Lily's graduations, first from 6th grade, then from middle school, now preparing for their junior year of high school. Photos of Ethan, now 8, teaching 3-year-old Grace her first signs. Photos of Eleanor, 73 now, holding her great-granddaughter with the practiced ease of a woman who had spent her life building family. The stroke had left its marks, a tremor in Eleanor's left hand, occasional moments of confusion, a slowness that frustrated a woman who had spent 62 years moving through the world with fierce determination. But her eyes were still sharp, her signs were still eloquent, and her love was still the foundation on which this entire family had been built. She sat in her favorite chair on Christmas morning, baby Grace on her lap, guiding tiny fingers into the sign for love. "Like hugging yourself," she demonstrated. "See? She's a natural." Emma watched from the kitchen doorway, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. She hadn't told anyone yet about baby number 3. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay?" "Better than okay." She turned to look at him. "I was just thinking about that restaurant, 11 years ago tonight. The worst night of your life. The best night of my life." She smiled. "I just didn't know it yet." Eleanor Parker died on a quiet Tuesday in April. She was 74 years old. She had lived to see her son happy again. She had held 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. She had watched Emma become the daughter she had chosen, not the one she had lost. She died in her sleep, in the house full of family she had helped build. Her last sign, offered to everyone gathered around her bed, was simple: "I love you." At her funeral, Emma delivered the eulogy. She didn't speak. Instead, she signed, her hands moving with the fluid grace Eleanor had taught her over 11 years of Sunday dinners and Wednesday night movie sessions, and countless moments of quiet connection. "Eleanor Parker taught me many things," Emma began. She taught me that being deaf isn't a limitation. It's just a different way of experiencing the world. She taught me that fear is a terrible way to live. She taught me that the best families aren't born, they're chosen. She paused, steadying herself. But most of all, she taught me about bridges. Eleanor spent her whole life building them. Bridges between the deaf and hearing worlds. Bridges between strangers and family. Bridges between grief and hope. Emma touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, still there after all these years, now with a fourth charm added, a tiny bridge. 40 years ago, a young deaf woman sat alone in a Philadelphia diner, heartbroken, convinced that love wasn't possible for someone like her. And she could have stayed there. She could have let that rejection define her. Emma looked at Nathan, at Sophie and Lily, now 16, beautiful young women who signed as naturally as they breathed, at Ethan and Grace, at the community of deaf and hearing people who had come to say goodbye to a woman who had touched all of their lives. Instead, she chose to be brave. She chose to believe that she was enough. And because of that choice, all of us are here today. Emma's hand stilled for a moment, then continued. 11 years ago, I sat crying in a restaurant 2 days before Christmas. I had just been rejected for being deaf. I was ready to give up on love, on hope, on everything. She smiled through her tears. And then 2 5-year-old girls walked up to my table and asked if they could join me. They told me I looked sad. They told me that Christmas was for being together. They were right. Emma took a breath. Eleanor once told me that some bridges take years to build. Others are built in a single evening. But every bridge, no matter how long it takes to construct, serves the same purpose. It connects two sides that couldn't reach each other before. She looked at Eleanor's casket, decorated with white roses and photos and the handprints of great-grandchildren who would grow up hearing stories about the grandmother they had only briefly known. Eleanor Parker was a bridge, and on the other side of every connection she built, every lesson she taught, every fear she helped overcome, every family she helped create, there was the same destination. Emma's hands moved slowly, deliberately, shaping the final word with all the love she had. Home. That night after the funeral, after the guests had gone, after the children were finally asleep, Emma sat on the back porch and looked at the stars. Nathan found her there. They sat in silence for a long time, the comfortable silence of two people who had learned to communicate without words, who had built a language of touch and presence, and shared grief and shared joy. She would have hated all the crying, Nathan finally said. Emma laughed softly. She would have told everyone to stop being dramatic and eat something. She would have been right. More silence, the comfortable kind. I keep thinking about that first night, Emma said, about what would have happened if Sophie and Lily hadn't come to my table. You would have gone home. I would have stayed oblivious. And 11 years of happiness would never have happened. It's terrifying, isn't it? How everything can change because two little girls decide to be kind. Nathan took her hand. That's what Mom always said. Every choice matters. Every moment of courage. Every decision to reach out instead of pulling back. It all adds up. It all builds bridges. Emma leaned against his shoulder. Somewhere inside, baby Grace cried, and Emma heard Ethan's footsteps as he went to comfort his sister the way he always did. Sophie and Lily were probably still awake, texting friends, living the complicated lives of teenagers who had grown up bilingual in ways most of their peers couldn't imagine. And on the mantel next to Sarah's photo, Eleanor smiled from a frame decorated with dried flowers from her wedding to Harold 40 years ago. She's still here, Emma said quietly, in all of us. Always, Nathan agreed. The stars wheeled overhead. The house settled around them with familiar creaks and sighs. Emma's mind drifted to a Philadelphia diner 40 years ago where a heartbroken 22-year-old had stared at a rejection note and believed her life was over. Eleanor had made a choice that night. Not immediately. It had taken months of grief, months of healing. But eventually she had chosen to believe that love was still possible, that she was enough. And because of that single act of courage, rippling forward through decades, all of this existed. Nathan, the girls, Ethan and Grace. This house full of laughter and sign language and love. Emma smiled at the stars. The deaf thing Ryan had written is more than I'm looking for. He had been right about one thing. She was more. More than he deserved. More than he could handle. More than his small world could contain. She was a teacher, a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend. She was deaf and eloquent and brave and loved. She was complicated and beautiful and exactly enough for the people who mattered. She was, at long last, home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember. The best love stories don't start with romance. They start with courage. They start with two little girls who see a crying stranger and decide she's worth knowing. They start with the radical belief that we are enough. All of us, exactly as we are. Subscribe to our channel where every story reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it. Because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.